Right. Canadian truckers rule, tweeted Elon Musk. Themselves out of a job. Here are 3 ways to prepare companies as the transport industry accelerates towards automation. Hi, I'm Dr. Ed. I'm just a geek dad who's obsessed about the future. I founded AI Parenting to help workplaces thrive in a world of growing automation. Now, as a trailer RV owner, the long haul trips that I've done with my family give me kind of a deep appreciation for some of the work that truckers need to do. In the 2020 alone, we did 6 trips during the summer to various campsites within Alberta. And before we got married, I told my wife Peggy that our retirement plan was to give the kids our home so that we could live the RV life. She still thinks today that I was joking. Now, I've met many of these truckers at campsites and started to get to know and have an appreciation for some of both the mental and the physical challenges around operating a greater than 10,000 pound gross vehicle weight beast that transports the goods that we depend on every day. And as I learn more about AI and automation, I really feel for truckers. But we have to look at the numbers. And so if you can bear with me, who are we talking about? What is your typical trucker? So I tried to look up some of the stats. And so one of the stats that I'll share is that you can see these stats from 2018 from Statista. 93% of truckers in America are male. And the vast majority do not hold, another 93% of truckers do not hold a college degree. Despite this, the transport industry in America employs over 2 million people, and it's growing rapidly. It actually hired over 200,000 or 16% more people between 2012 and 2016. And you can imagine just over the last 2 years, the amount of growth that the transport industry has had is quite substantial. So there's another challenge, right? There's a challenge of people in this industry. The World Economic Forum, from this article about autonomous trucks could be the answer to the global supply chain crisis. So what they say is that 20% of driver positions will not be filled in 2020 and in Eurasia, so like in Europe and Asia. And based on this demographic, the trends are forecasted for growth in the demand for freight could easily double to 160,000 open positions that are not filled by 2030. And so this particular article asked the question, so are autonomous trucks a solution to the global supply chain crisis? You want my personal opinion? I kind of feel probably not, but let me explain why. And I think maybe it'll be more clear once I've had a chance to explain. I'll describe 3 different ways that companies can prepare for the future of connection. So the 3 aspects that we're going to cover today are: 1, a humane connection. The second is regulation. And then the third, or the regulation bottleneck, as it's referred to. So this is one of the big things that's impacting the industries, the regulation bottleneck. And then the last is the just transportation tech. Of course, like as a tech channel, we got to talk about tech. So that's something that we are going to be covering more today. And so the three aspects are like a humane connection. Why is this really important? The second is the regulation bottleneck, and then the third is transportation tech. And so I hope everyone is able to join me today. If you are seeing this, pop a comment in the chat. Hello and welcome. Today we are talking future of transport. And specifically, I'm talking about the shipping industry, because that's an area that is interesting because I've read about this quite a bit, and it's made me a little bit more curious, the recent events that have been happening in Canada. And so I want to start off with just talking about the first aspect, which we call the humane connection. And this one, I would say, doesn't just apply to the transportation industry. It applies to every industry. Oh, hello, Alice. Good to see you. Alice is saying she's joining us today, and she's saying, Dr. Ed, my grandfather was a trucker. Ah, congratulations. So he's probably watching the stuff that's happening in Canada right now pretty closely, I'd imagine. And to me, this made me very curious about, well, what's happening with this industry? What can the industry do to better prepare? So congratulations. So the first thing I wanted to share was that many of you know that, so we're talking about humane connection. Oh, I should have put that up here. Maybe I'll add it now. It's not too late. So humane connection, regulation, bottleneck, and transport tech. All right. So the first one, humane connection. So if you've followed me before, you probably know that science communication has been my passion for a very long time. When I was doing my PhD, I was very fortunate to be selected as one of the 4 researchers who got to participate in a media training with the co-host of the Discovery Channel's Daily Planet science program. His name was Jay Ingram. And I've also had unique opportunities to be selected to attend the YouTube EduCon conference, where I got to meet some amazing YouTube educators, including Derek, who hosts Veritasium, Destin, who hosts Smarter Every Day, and Diana, who hosts Physics Girl. And these, of course, I will say nothing but good things. These are some of the most friendly and caring people you will ever meet. However, and there's a big however right now, things are changing, right? What I'm noticing is when it came to things like vaccines or the need for respirators or the need for better filtration, we had a huge problem. Explaining the science alone wasn't working. So last week, I reached out to Mary Ann Moser, the Chief Executive Officer of TELUS Spark, which is a hands-on science experience here in Calgary. She's a renowned science communicator who led Calgary's annual Beakerhead Outdoor Science Experience. And I had previously volunteered at Beakerhead to speak to both students and to companies, and had the honor of getting some more science communication training from her. And so this connection allowed us to talk a little bit about, well, what's really going on? Why is this not working? Why is explaining the science just not working? And we spoke about this, how communicating the science of respirators has been so hard since the parents that I heard from recently at the parent trustee forum were not really interested in studies. In fact, they were mostly communicating just how they felt. They were refuting people with the hard, refuting these individuals or refuting these parents with hard facts. It wasn't working. It was just getting them more entrenched. And she told me that a lot of this communication mirrors what happens what happened with the Framework Institute studies in Boston, where they had to handle resistance related to smoking, related to wearing seatbelts, and alcohol consumption during pregnancy. You see, like, let's just take the example of just like smoking. Millions of dollars were spent on nationwide advertising campaigns that repeated the science that smoking kills and causes lung cancer. And regulations were changed to show these graphic images of like cancerous lungs with the hope that youths would get the message. But the result was barely any change in the smoking behavior of youths. Like, why is that? Why would there be no change? I know when I was young, pretty much all I wanted to do all day was just rebel against what my parents told me to do, or rebel against what the system told me to do. For some, smoking was their way to fight against an oppressive society. Researchers at the Framework Institute recognized this, that there was this emotional reaction to being told what to do. Young adults grow up naturally doubtful of authority. And so how was the Institute going to come up with this new messaging that did not conflict with young adult values? How would they do it? It's an interesting thing. Like, science communication is this beautiful art. And I actually think that it doesn't matter the industry that you're in. This kind of lesson is very important. And it's not about talking about the numbers and not about talking about the science. That's not going to work. We've got to use a different approach. Maybe one, yes, that it is focused more on telling stories, but the stories still have to align with their values. So the solution in this case has to work with the theme of a distrust of authority. That's right, a distrust of authority. So tell youths that they've been duped. They thought they were rebelling against the government, but it turns out they were doing exactly what the tobacco companies wanted them to do. Sure, they knew that cigarettes were addictive and that they caused lung cancer, but think of that recurring revenue for these companies. Your rebellion was making them rich, and you didn't even know it. Despite the millions of dollars that were spent in advertising with few results, it was this change of mindset in their own marketing that really started to change the tide for young adult smoking, from this thing that, oh, I'm being a rebel, like I'm really standing up to authority in what I'm doing, to no, you are not standing up to authority at all. You're just like switching from one to the other. And so this is important. This is important for all sorts of communications, is just knowing your audience and knowing what they value. There was so I talk about Andrew Yang a lot. There was this Why Boys and Men Are Failing podcast by Andrew Yang. He talked about how there are fewer and fewer opportunities for non-college educated men to break out of the middle class. I mean, what we're finding in statistics is that girls are doing really well in school. In fact, they're performing better in kindergarten to grade 12, and in terms of university entrances, there are more women that are graduating from university than men. And so there are becoming fewer and fewer industries that are mostly men. And like I said at the beginning, transportation is one of those industries. It's still like 94% men. And manufacturing is another one of those industries, which is still greater than 75% men. So these are, unfortunately, at the same time, also the same types of jobs that are at the highest risk of being automated, according to the World Economic Forum. So trucking and transport matters because there are fewer and fewer opportunities for non-college educated males to make it to the middle class. If you look at average hourly wages for truckers in Alberta in 2022, I don't have all the stats here. They're about $30 an hour, with a yearly salary averaging at around $68,000 in 2022. And that's from the Alberta, like the province of Alberta statistics. So they may vary depending on the state that you're in. The key here is that many of these men have seen opportunity after opportunity disappear from their lives. That is, they used to be able to just get that manufacturing job and then just stay there for life. But those kinds of things aren't as common these days. There are many, of course, politicians who are promising to bring back jobs to their community. But in the end, they have not seen a growth in jobs for them, because the reality is, like, automation at the same time has been growing. So there's been a lower need for labor in these industries. And we know that for everyone, like, not having a job is a terrible position to be in for your mental health. And for guys, I'd say, like, it's even more significant, right? Like, we get a lot of our own sense of, like, we want to contribute. We want to, like, have, like, we're driven for achievement as guys. And we get a lot of our significance from our jobs. And so there's also other factors as well. Like, those who don't have employment are significantly less likely to be married, since the number one factor that women list as, like, the most important factor for a mate is someone with a stable job. And so while studies have shown that life expectancy doesn't really change for married or unmarried women, an unmarried man should expect to die 7 to 10 years earlier than a married man. These are the statistics. They are the, like, just look it up on in the War on Normal People from Andrew Yang. It's just very interesting. When I first heard that, I was like, yeah, like, a lot of these challenges, you know, I can tell you, like, my own story. Like, it's something that I can relate to, because, like, as a man, when you're laid off and let's say you're not able to provide, either, like, say, for your parents, or if you have a family, you feel like a total loser. You just want to hide in your basement, maybe play some video games or consume social media. That, of course, is the type that validates how you feel. And I think that whatever the messaging is, it absolutely needs to speak to the resistance, like, that comes from those who are distrustful of authority. Marianne Moser's discussion just around youth smoking and distrust of authority just made me think that we need to focus more on automation and the trucking industry. That is, Elon Musk says Canadian truckers rule. He didn't add the part where you guys are ruling yourselves out of a job. He is the one, this is exactly the same person who is trying to build self-driving trucks, who is trying to build the EV trucks that is going to literally replace your job. And so he is saying this in his own self-interest, as opposed to, oh, he really wants to help out truckers. No, no, he does not. Right? Like, you are literally like buying into to him. You think he's helping you, but the reality is he is not at all. So does that mean, like, all of a sudden, because of these, because the message here is that truckers, when they're doing a big protest, what are they showing? Like, this is not the majority of truckers, but the small group is saying, we're not reliable, we're likely to create a disruption. If that's the case, then if anything, that's just going to push like owners of like the transport industry towards more automation. The example I would have would be, for example, there's the company Foxconn, and some of you, like if you have an iPhone or if you have most electronic laptops, they're all made by Foxconn. In fact, they own, I think, a third of the world's computer numerical control machines, or CNC machines. They're the things that will take like a block of aluminum and then like carve out the shape of a MacBook for you. And having workers protest and say like, oh, we don't like these conditions, did not lead to better conditions for their workers. It just pushed them quicker and quicker into automation. So it's kind of a warning that this stuff is coming. They are investing heavily in this area because there's a lot of money that can be made by moving in this industry. Like, the transportation industry would love to be able to operate at night, but they can't because of there's certain rules. And so if they could do that, they could dramatically increase their revenues. But does that mean like technology and tech is coming right away? Like for automation, it's coming for their jobs? I would say not really, no. And let me explain. The next part, I hope that makes sense, and feel free to ask questions anytime, is the regulation bottleneck is something I want to talk about. This is something that is very interesting. I don't think it's going to be, so this is my personal perspective, but I think the biggest bottleneck to changes in the transportation industry is not technology, it's regulatory. And we saw this with the introduction of ride-sharing companies. So for example, in Alberta, when we had Uber, the arrival of Uber, we had a huge amount of protest from the existing cab driving industry, right? Like, this is not what they wanted. This would really hurt jobs. And if this got to the point where there was enough of them that were like, hey, we can't operate anymore, that can become a huge, like, that could change elections, that could change like the kinds of actions that people will take. So the regulatory stuff the law is much slower than the tech. And so we see this happening, like people are saying, even if you automated all the driving components of tech, it still wouldn't work. Because in order to cross a border, you need to have a person like cross the border. You can't have like a robot, just moving across. So we would have to change like federal laws, or we'd have to change our agreements between countries in order to allow something like a robot to cross the border. So that's going to take a long time, right? And there's probably going to be a lot of resistance. And so that stuff will probably take a lot longer than the actual technology side. I see the technology is quicker to resolve than the human aspect. Right now, there's a lot of like regulatory forms. There are like, you need to show identification. Like there are all these things built into the system which assume that there is going to be a person. And so that was the message that I got from reading the PricewaterhouseCoopers message on transportation technology. And so maybe I'll show you a bit of what that looks like. So what they say is that even if you were automating freight, right, you start with this. So you start with even like, let's say the trailer can recognize, okay, and it communicates to the truck. Then you have to look at like things like the weight, of course, that has to be a measurement. And then you can measure like loading capacity, the scheduled route, you can automate those things. But you still need a driver. You still need to be notified about, like, dealing with exceptions is still a big important aspect of it. And then there's still an agreement that's struck between the truck operator and the freight owner. So there's a negotiation, there's a human step involved. And of course, there's additional information that needs to be collected by the support trailer location, maintenance, organization, rental payments, and more. And so what are they saying? They're basically saying that they got to have humans in the loop. You cannot just have machines only. And that was their message, is that there's certain things that we're a long ways from that. We can automate some aspects of it, but there are certainly still a long way, at least from a regulatory perspective. So I hope that makes sense. But when we see like futures of buildings or even the use of like AI systems, I think they're all very powerful. There is a human element to it. And that's why like rules and regulations is kind of the main regulatory bottleneck that you have to consider. Now, I was just referring to this big study, and it's not huge. It's like 30, 40 pages. And one of its main messages is kind of related to my next. Well, is it? No, it's not. So take a look at what we have here. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, so they're the authors of this study that I'm referring to, the era of digitized trucking, charting your transformation to a new business model. One of the things that they say in their report is that the trucking logistics costs will fall by 47% by 2030, largely through the reduction of labor. So let's start asking, like, what are those two biggest costs for operating a transport vehicle, like a truck, for example? And it turns out that the first largest cost is diesel fuel. And then the second largest cost is labor. So let's go into those, right? Like, so what could make the labor cost more fuel efficient? What are the options there? So here we go. We are now getting into this kind of last section. So of course, if you have any questions, feel free to post them. But we just finished the regulation bottleneck, and we're now moving to the transport tech. So now, if you've missed it, so we've gone through regulation bottleneck, and we're doing transport tech. All right. And I think transportation tech is probably what most people are interested in. They want to know, well, what's happening in that space. And I think that for me, the interesting part is how, yes, we can totally build new electric EV trucks. We know this can be done. That's interesting, but not as interesting as conversions, actually, for me. So the reason for this is that battery swappable freight trucks, it might seem like this distant thing, because I don't know when Tesla is going to start introducing their technology. But this is already a reality today in Australia. So, for example, there's the company Janus Energy Electric Vehicles. It's proposing that for truckers in Australia that instead of spending money on engine rebuilds, transportation companies should instead invest in an electric conversion that could effectively pay for itself in 1 year. So the way this works is essentially for around $70,000 Australian dollars, Janus Energy could convert any existing diesel truck into a battery swappable electric vehicle. Each battery set provides 400 to 600 kilometers of range, and it can be swapped out in about 3 minutes. Seriously, let's take a look at the video. Let's see if I can do this. Not working. Why didn't it work? Okay, here we go. Okay. That did not work. I don't know why. Try again. Oh, there we go. Yay. Okay, swapping. There's no sound. Okay. Oh, because I turned off the sound. So this is a, I guess, live swap of the battery change. They're using a forklift basically to take it out. Okay. So swap
Janus drive
is
power.
complete. And then this is just a driving. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. That's kind of, I think, an early prototype of what they're driving. Oh, Freddie has a question. More electric buses and the introduction of high-speed rail from Future Public. Yes, that's right. Yeah, like this kind of stuff I expect is coming. But I think that the key question is, okay, so what does that do for your costs? Like, I mean, it's not like batteries are cheap, right? Like this is I don't know, potentially like $100,000 of batteries. So the reality is they're not planning on actually selling these battery units. So the company plans to rent batteries to truck operators at 140 Australian dollars per day. And so if we're comparing the cost, so 140 Australian dollars per day. For reference, truckers typically pay around $238 Australian per day for diesel gas. So it's already a roughly 42% savings on the largest operating cost of trucking. But, and this is one of the key ones, is that there's also truck maintenance costs. And that's not cheap either. Like we were talking about engine rebuilds, like every hundreds of thousands of kilometers, you need to have the engine rebuilt. And that runs at a cost of 80 Australian dollars a day if you're using a diesel engine. But Janus Energy estimates that the maintenance cost, once you switch down to an electric vehicle, is around 24 Australian dollars per day, or a 70% savings. So you're saving half on gas, 70% on the maintenance. Janus Energy says that the impact on driver fatigue is huge because we've taken the vibrations and the fumes and the noise out of the truck. They become more like cars to drive. And like as somebody who like transports the RV, like when you drive with the RV, you hear it, like there's the noise. But you know, we're just driving a car, right? Like that's still relatively like isolated from the noise. It doesn't have nearly the vibrations of a truck. And so that's another thing. It's like the comfort and the experience for the driver is another big one. And so that one I hope makes sense. And I do think like we're going to see more like electric buses, as Freddie had said, and more high-speed rail options, absolutely, in the future, because we're essentially getting to a point where we have to rethink transportation anyways. Might as well start thinking about what's going to work best for everyone. So the second largest operating cost for the trucking transportation industry is labor. And I'm sure you've seen the news that they're investing heavily in automation. I don't need to show you Otto or what Tesla is doing. You're probably already familiar with those kinds of things. But not only could the automated trucks reduce the labor costs, but essentially they could potentially enable companies to double the distance that they travel each day by running the trucks at night. So outfitting them with LiDAR systems, for example, would allow them to see better than people can see at nighttime. And that is very powerful because then for the same like fixed asset cost, you can travel double the distance. You could potentially increase your profit to that, like double. So it's a substantial savings that I'm sure companies are going to be all over. And so this is why, like you're looking at the industry, this is why people are moving towards automation. Like if you're not moving towards this, can you imagine competing against like some kind of transportation company that can travel at nighttime? You would never win. Your company would fold. Like you would have no chance of surviving this. And so the reality is that it's not China, it's not Mexico, it is not immigrants that are coming for jobs in the trucking and manufacturing industry. It is automation. Automation in a big way, because it's a fixed, it turns operating expenses into a capital expense. You just spend one time and you just profit from it. So whoever has the capital to buy all of this automation can beat everyone because of the benefits of efficiency, and then no operating expense business is able to compete as a result. And that's the thing that really changes this industry from, oh, we're going to resist automation to we have no choice. We either do this or we're gone. And it's very similar to what we had seen in the personal transportation, like the taxi industry, right? Like when Uber came in, they automated so many aspects that if you pretty much weren't using it, you couldn't compete. It was less convenient. And we're getting to that point as well. So even like, let's say they're protesting right now for removing health restrictions. Let's say we removed all of the health restrictions and allowed truckers to move like freely between the Canada and US border more easily. Would things go back to the way that they were before the pandemic? No, of course not. Right? This is all a lie. It's like, oh, we're going to bring things back to the way that they used to be. I'm sorry, they won't. Right? In fact, protests like these are exactly what is convincing the owners of trucking companies to automate their fleet as soon as possible. Think about it. We're just proving how unreliable some, truckers choose to be. They say, I'm not going to be working, I'm going to be protesting. This is really tough for them, right? Like this is, I get it. Like they're trying to fight for what they feel is right, but they're actually showing a lot of companies, especially those with capital, how much better things would be if transportation was automated, right? So Foxconn was just one of the examples. I talked about like how they own a third of the whole world's like computer numerical control machines, those little machines that take a block of aluminum and just drill they drill out your laptop or your iPhone. Resistance in those fields did not result in better conditions, working conditions for their workers and better pay. Instead, it just pushed companies into the automation space much, much quicker. And so they just thought, oh, what else can I automate? And that's where they spent their efforts. In fact, in another one where I visited the huge LG display factory in South Korea, I saw firsthand how most of their TV manufacturing facility was completely automated. I mean, the few technicians that worked there, their job was to repair machines that broke down. And so this is one of the reasons why I am really deeply concerned about education, like in Alberta, but also in other places around the world, because like in Alberta, we have this curriculum that forces our children to memorize a bunch of facts that you could quickly search on Google. But it doesn't just force them to memorize facts, it also robs them of the key skills that they need to succeed in this world of growing automation. I want every child to know that increasingly our digital world or our digital presence is like in this new digital world, basically data is the new vote, right? And we're seeing that. We are seeing that in a big way. You don't get to choose how your data is used, say by a company like Spotify. But if enough of us get together and we have an idea that we share, like, wow, Spotify is sharing a lot of misinformation and a bunch of people cancel their subscription all at the same time, you can have a big impact on that company. And so you can say, you know what? You are no longer allowed to have my data. And if a bunch of people do this at the same time, you can have an impact there. You do have a vote, right? So your data is your vote. And of course, knowing coding, knowing a little bit about artificial intelligence, why is that so important? Because that's the law on the internet. In fact, if I were like in a vehicle with automation, I probably want to know a little bit about how it's making decisions, because then I would be able to predict when it's going to screw up. And it's going to screw up. Where I think a lot of people are not ready for like level 4 type of automation with their driving. They need to be aware at least a little bit about how AI works and why it's screwed up, in order to be able to predict that, oh, yeah, I'm heading into this kind of turn. It's got like a lot of the similar grass that is similar to the color of the signs. We're going to run into some problems. I better get ready to take control of this, because you're not going to get a warning. You're just going to be like, I've lost control, help. And so the ability to predict when the AI is going to fail it could be a life or death thing if you are in the trucking industry. And that said, I also want to say, like, I think it's interesting what we talked about earlier about conversions over buying something brand new. It's just because like of the capital cost and the time that's required to build a new product. It takes a long time to do like the full product development cycle, and you probably have to go through several iterations before it's actually good enough in order to supplant what is already there. Not saying that it won't come, it's just it takes longer. And so this is one of the reasons why I've mentioned this before, but for those who have never seen it in action before, it's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about Comma AI. And so some of you know George Hotz. He is the person who hacked the first iPhone, right? And he got a big reward from it. And one of the things that he decided to do afterwards was use some of his development expertise in order to build a self-driving car. And it's like, well, why do that? Like, Tesla already provides some kind of self-driving capability. Well, he wanted to provide that capability for existing cars, ones that had some of the self-driving lane keep assist functionality, but he wanted to go next level. Though instead of just keeping you in the lane, he wanted them to be able to drive you from point A to point B, which in Tesla terminology is referred to full self-driving, but you can imagine that that kind of functionality has never really been available for us. So or for most vehicles. But now, like if you have a not even a great vehicle, right? Like if you have a Toyota Corolla, like a new one, and you have this functionality, boom, you got it. You have the ability to use it. So that is something that is very exciting. And so let's get into Comma AI, because I think that is important. I think that this technology, I think if anything, I think it's more significant than Tesla's autopilot. And I think the reason is because it just opens it up for everyone. Oh yeah, this guy's kind of cool. Which video should I show you? Yeah, let's show you this one.
You can't expect your team to manage...
Okay. Hold on a sec. Let me skip that for you. Sorry about that. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a long one. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of it. If you guys are ready.
Whatnot, that's easier just to drive that, and then you get on, and then you click on Open Pilot, and sit back and chill. So. Again, this is one of my very, very favorite things about having Open Pilot in a car like this, is the ability to just kind of relax. Let the car drive, enjoy the scenery. Got a nice sunset coming up in a few minutes here. Still keeping eyes forward and whatnot. But, definitely enjoying it.
Let's see if he can go on a turn. He's just driving straight. Drat.
Don't necessarily like using it. It has a tendency to slow down in places where I might not want it to slow.
Here.
Or whatever they're going to end up calling it, if they end up having to change that or not. So we'll see. Go ahead and kick Open Pilot back on. I was yakking and driving, so I wasn't concentrating on actually clicking it back on. So now we're back on. I would have clicked it on normally back there, a half mile back.
Okay, so that's turning it back on.
Usually want to get over in the other lane, but if it catches this one, we'll give it one more try. Any braking? No braking whatsoever. All right, so I had to brake pretty hard for that because it was not going to do it. So, all right, that's the last of it.
So, I don't know if that one showed the full example because it it wasn't. It felt like it was lane keeping, but it didn't. I didn't see it like make a turn. I didn't see actions where it was making the turn. But right now, these ones are designed with a cell phone plan. They're connected to a GPS that allows you to do turn by turn directions. So it will like literally drive the vehicle for you. But maybe in his version, it wasn't working at the time. And that's something to keep in mind. It's like, well, where's it going to fail? And I think that as these get developed, because it's open pilot, like it's open source software, like this is stuff that we expect to improve. And can it work on trucks? Yes, apparently it's been tried on some trucks. I know like Toyota Tacoma is a truck that it's been tried on and it's compatible with, but I don't know about larger trucks. But I imagine like since the code is open source, the right kind of supplier would be motivated to create that kind of functionality. And I see it as it's not there to replace. It is not there to replace the driver. It is just there to keep people safer. Oh, there's something on the road, you need to react really quickly. It takes care of that. Or you just want to make a more pleasant and comfortable experience for the driver. That's what this is intended for. It's not intended for like completely autonomous driving. Level 5, I believe is what it's called. It is intended for clearly level 4. There's still a human operator in this vehicle. And I think my overall message here is that this stuff is coming. But what does it mean when this stuff arrives? What does this mean for the 2 million individuals who, mostly 93% male, who drive trucks? What does it mean for their jobs when this does arrive? And I think that what we are seeing right now is just like a small, it's just a small preview of what's to come. I hate to say it, like us guys, we're terrible when we're depressed. Like we don't, most of the time, I don't think guys just like hide in a corner or they hide in their basement and just play video games. Maybe some do, but others like to watch lots of conspiracy, content on YouTube, and they like to take action, get in a vehicle. Of course, this is a minority, right? This does not represent us. And you can see like, oh yeah, like these are like extremist groups. And I will dive into this in a future episode, a little bit more about online extremism. There's been some studies that have been done about right-wing extremist groups in Canada, and they've found actually that Canada has one of the largest number of groups that they've found worldwide are Canadian groups. And yes, like some of their ideology ends up in like becoming actions. But this is not just a small number of people, right? Like we're talking about $9 million, $10 million of funding. Like you can park outside, like you can stay outside protesting for a very long time. And it's very, like, to me, it's not clear like what they're going to do because of what it represents, right? Like it represents a dramatic shift in power. Like in theory, like you could just park your trucks and then literally demand anything you want from the government if they cave to this desire. But if you don't, then what do you do about your infrastructure? How do you make it safe to transport goods? And if you don't do something, then there are immediate consequences. And if you do something like meet with their demands, then essentially there are long-term consequences, because they essentially think of this like a test. This is like a test of how far can we go? how far can we go and disrupt public infrastructure, say the things that we want to do? Like, what are you going to do about it? And I would say that we're failing. Like our governments are saying, they're not expecting something like this. This wasn't on their bingo playlist or their play card. And we are seeing over and over again, just this big clash between the two. And at the same time, I also see there are some real challenges to the long term, right? What are the long-term solutions for health? And I'll have to talk about health in a different episode, but is that going to work, right? Is it going to work for us to have to continue to wear masks indefinitely, or will it stop at some point? And what is the point in which it will stop? And it's also there's some CDC studies out there that have shown that masking works. It in some speaker and emitter kind of tests, they found that just putting a mask on can reduce about 75% of all particulates. Okay, that's great. It does something. It's better than nothing. But the thing that they've also found is that in the same CDC study that they tried better filtration, HEPA filtration inside the same facility, and they found not as good. 67% of particulates were removed using HEPA filtration alone with no masking. And so to me, I wonder if we need to start thinking more seriously about HEPA filtration, and we need to start seeing this as what is the end game? What is the long-term solution? What is the thing that's going to last a long period? You invest heavily into filtration. You don't require compliance from every citizen. You can potentially protect from other types of airborne diseases in the future a lot better. So people benefit from it. And of course, I don't know, maybe they don't have enough money, and so you have to make it optional. But if you are able to think longer term about where is this headed, it does feel like there are things that we can do that are long-term solutions that do not require constant compliance. Although you may need it temporarily. And what they found is that you combine the two, masking and HEPA filtration, and you get over 90% of particulates removed. So if you need a stopgap measure, something that is going to really make a huge dent, your hospitals are going to get overwhelmed, you do that for, a few weeks, and that could have a huge impact on the number of hospitalizations. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm just a geek dad. I love looking at stats. I love looking at the reports and the studies. And I also love thinking long term. Love thinking about, well, what is going to work for our kids, for our children? What are the things that we need to do? Let's say you decide, okay, I'm going to work in the trucking industry. Get to understand AI. Get to understand, play with OpenPilot, right? You can download it. Get a comma AI, install it onto a Camry or something, and just get to know what that experience is like. Get to know where it fails, why it fails. Become an expert in kind of compensating for those failures, because that in itself is going to be highly valuable. Yeah, you're not going to be spending maybe as much time just doing the manual operation. Now you can think of oh, I'm kind of the fixer. I'm the person who fixes these vehicles. I'm going to figure out where all of its flaws are. That could be a very interesting way. That could be very creative for people who are in this industry. And it feels kind of weird. Why would you want to learn that kind of stuff? But it's better to be ahead of the curve than behind it and essentially made irrelevant by it. And so that is my message for all of you today. I think that I am very optimistic. I am naturally an optimist in this area. And, I do need to give a lot of credit to where credit is due. Andrew Yang has been talking about this for some time. Kai-Fu Lee has also been talking about automation, AI, in the transportation industry. He also refers to the different AI revolutions. One of the things that he refers to is this, I think people call it today the metaverse, but it's where everything in the physical world also has a digital equivalent. And that digital equivalent is becoming more and more important. So the more that you can understand that what these systems are trying to do is they're trying to take the real world and then turn it into some kind of computer model that they can use. And that involves simplifying the data a lot. And if you can understand how it simplifies the data, you're gonna have a huge advantage. And so no AI, and study that stuff. I highly recommend it. There is no disadvantage to being more aware of the rules when it comes to the internet, to the transportation industry, to how everything works. If you were an Uber driver, if I were an Uber driver today, I would want to know AI. Seriously. Why does it pick certain individuals to get the next job? How does it decide who is going to who is going to get the next job? How would I be able to tweak and game the system in order to ensure that I get more gigs as an Uber driver than other people? Well, maybe I'd have to show to the system that I'm a high frequency driver. How would I do that? Well, if I had 5 friends that would just book rides with each other, book rides with each other, would I be able to kick everybody's butt? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right? If I knew how the algorithm for Uber worked, I could 100% game the system. Right? If I knew that the Uber app was looking to see if I had a competitor app like the Lyft app installed, and then I get better rates or something to attract people to go to Uber, then yeah, I'd absolutely be playing that game. Your knowledge of these little tweaks and hacks of what they're looking for is a world of difference. The amount of income that an individual is going to be able to get, somebody who knows versus doesn't know AI, is substantial. So, if you have any further questions, tell me what you're wondering. Post a comment. I'm happy to respond live to these. That's kind of why we're here as well. And of course, if you haven't already, I'd highly recommend that up to you. But I would say for me, edwardc.com/now. Yes. If you want to learn a little bit more, or if you want to get in touch just to find out, what else is there? Or do you have courses? Do you teach? Do you speak? Do you do coaching? The answer to all those is yes. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about what do I do, I've been working in education and technology, and more recently doing some speaking for companies. You can learn a little bit more at edwardc.com/now. That's edwardc.com/now. And what I'm trying to do is every week, usually it's around Tuesdays that I'm trying to do these live streams. But sometimes I'm not able to because, for example, tomorrow night is the Lunar New Year. So happy Lunar New Year to everyone who celebrates the Lunar New Year. And it's an important family time. I'm not skipping that. So, to me, I just wanted to cover a little bit about this. But over the next little while, my plan is I'm going to cover a lot more about not just about AI, I don't think that's good enough to just talk about, like these bad things about AI. I feel like what we need to do is we need to arm you with, and your companies with, all the right tools to be prepared, to defend yourself, to make sure that you come out on top. And understanding that this world of work is changing substantially, especially right now, right? Like think about like this, just the transport industry, the amount of change that we just talked about today. And think about that happening across every single industry in the world. What does that mean? Like, what kind of world do we live in, right? CM Alvarez says, I hope you have a wonderful new year. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, CM. I really appreciate that. I think that being prepared, what do they often say, like, failing to plan is planning to fail. People have been warned that this has been coming for a long time. The technology is getting really good now. Computing costs are dropping dramatically. I just ordered like a new laptop, a new MacBook Pro. And I did a test at the Apple store. It's like, I wonder how well something like this live streaming works on the new MacBooks Pros. Because this one takes up like, 80, 90% of my CPU. And when I tried it, I'm like, whoa, it takes almost nothing. It takes like 20%. And so it's like 5 times faster than the previous like few years ago computer. Like that's the kind of speed difference we're talking about from generation to generation. And what does that mean so now all of these really expensive things like doing AI or doing this type of processing is no longer expensive. And so now it's very feasible for me to do some kind of like VR thing or something that's a little bit more complicated. So be aware of these things, be aware of what's changing. If you have any questions, just reach out. You can reach out, like I would recommend like edwardc.com /now. If you just fill in some information, just let me know. If there's any topics that you would like me to cover, any industries that you think are really interesting as well. And of course, any particular like new technologies. Happy to talk tech, but I also want to make sure that it includes a little bit of discussion of the practicalities of it. That is, I don't want to be just talking about AI. I want to talk about making AI more equitable for everyone, because we already know that existing AI systems they're biased. They're biased against people of certain, like, I think a more accurate thing was like they behave in very racist ways. They behave in ways that hurt certain groups of people of certain ethnicities. And I want to talk about how we can create an anti-racist AI. And it's something that I'm starting to study a little bit more, is like anti-racism. So it's something that I would love to dive in a little bit more. I don't have enough time today, but in a future episode. So if you want to like stay in touch, hit the like button, hit subscribe, stay in touch. I would love to see where this goes. In any case, thank you very much for joining. Have a great evening and have a happy Lunar New Year. Thanks.